I won't forget, coming from the Middle East, I was asked to take a low performing school in Indiana.
A religion received through fear or trauma cannot bring true peace or harmony.
If we let them continue to write their narrative, they're gonna write their story about their victory.
Maybe lazy sometimes, right? And this is a stock story. This is a dominant narrative. But when we look at that statement, that might not really be the case, right? Until you begin to relate with other Yorubas.
If you go to YouTube and also on Facebook, most importantly, because I've been researching about it, I'm going to do something on it. I'm going to create a work on it, but I've not decided yet on that. The information that is shared or that is allowed to circulate about and within the African diaspora community and among Africa are very negative information. The information about nudity, women that are going naked on the street, information of Africans doing extraordinary horrible things. So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining on today's conversation on our storytelling series. This is the African Diaspora Storytelling Series, where we use the power of storytelling to own our voice and, of course, to share also with other people, to be able to talk about what are important to us. Because as a people, there are things that are peculiar to us. We have had experiences, and we believe that it is our to share this story. We don't expect anybody to come and do this for us. So every 2 weeks, we join with professionals from different places, all across the places, to share their story. And this is what we are doing today. We are happy to do that. And we do this every 14 days. So if this is your first time here, I encourage you to check out this series. We have a lot of them that we have been doing for over 2 years, where we are talking about anything from our history to story to challenges that we also have in the diaspora. So why not? It is important that we talk about them because it is our story. So today we are looking at what we call the importance of owning our story. Why we must own our narrative is particularly important for us as people of African descent, that we don't expect anybody to come and do this for us. We are able to do it ourselves, and we're not going to wait, and we are going to be unapologetic about it. And of course, for those of you that might not know who I am, I'm originally from Nigeria. My name is Obehi Ewanfoh. I live in the northern part of Italy, the city called Verona. So for some time, I've been doing this research about the presence of Africans in the northern city of Italy and in the Veneto region. This is actually where the entire process started, that are now expanded to different parts of the world, where we are talking about the experiences of people of African descent, our story, our challenges sometimes, and why not also our opportunity, because we have a lot of opportunities among us in our community. So if this is your first time of hearing about me, I encourage you to check out what I do. So what are we talking about today? Some points. We're talking about reclaiming. We're talking about also shaping, and we're talking about also empowering. Because storytelling, like we understand, is able to do all of these. It helps us to be able to reclaim our story, our authentic voice, our representation in the world. And it helps us to also shape that narrative so that other people will talk to us, identify us according to how we want to identify ourselves. And guess what? It also helps us to empower ourselves, our identity, our community. All these are what we are going to be touching today in this conversation of storytelling. Now, I want you to pay attention to this. That is, why is it even important? Well, it is important because it helps us to be in control of our narrative, or control of how people should see us, starting from how do we even see ourselves. You see, we don't need to wait for somebody to come and tell the story for us. This is why we are championing it. This is why we are saying that we need to own the story. So this is important for us. It helps us to also create create safe space for us to build up leadership, innovation, build up entrepreneurship, empower people within the community. So these are very important for us. But maybe you want to learn more about what we do. I encourage you to check out, therefore, A-Classes Media, where we have over 2,000 articles covering anything from education, tourism, African diaspora stories, speeches by important leaders in our community. Why not? You can also check out the Obehi Podcast. I've done more than 1,000 interviews. You see, we are really heavy here. We're not just on the surface. We are going deep. Sometimes these are very in-depth interviews. They are lasting sometimes up to like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes, talking about important things because our history are deep. So we don't need to just go on the surface and do 2 or 3 minutes to talk about something as important as our experiences. But what about if you want to use storytelling in your business? Then I encourage you to check out our service. It's called Story to Asset Framework. We basically help you to own your story, and not only that, but using it as a tool for you to be able to connect to the right people. So these are some of the things that you will benefit if you want to leverage the power of storytelling coming to us. But of course, I'm not the one that is speaking today. I'm just here as the one who is asking the question. So I'm going to start by inviting Dr. Gwendolyn to open the floor for us. Dr. Gwendolyn, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please tell the people who you are.
Okay. I am Dr. Gwendolyn Battle Levert. I am an international leadership and literacy trainer. I have taught from elementary to high school, the university level. I'm a founder of a charter school. And at this point in my life, I'm devoting it to writing. So I'm doing a lot of writing with my new book, Who Says I Can't? Closing the Third Grade Gap. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Gwendolyn. So we are curious about your take on the conversation of today, the importance of owning our story, of owning our narrative, actually. What do you take from that? What is your first take on that conversation? Then, of course, we are going to be passing the mic on to other people too.
Well, I was able to, as my father used to say, ponder on the subject or the topic. And I thought of the sentence that stopped me cold. I won't forget, coming from the Middle East, I was asked to take a low-performing school in Indiana. And so the African American population was very high. The community was like 70 or 80% African American. I did not know the history of the community. But I'll never forget the day a third grader in my boys to men's club stopped me cold. We were sitting in a circle, little black boys, 8 and 9 years old, already labeled low performing with major discipline problems. And I was reading aloud about powerful Black men, inventors, leaders, visionaries, thinkers. And I was just feeding them up with hope that they could do better, they could be better. And then one little boy looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "Dr. Levert, I don't want to know anything about Black people." Well, the room went silent. All of the boys, they were looking at each other and then looking at me, waiting to see what my response would be. And it felt like the air just got pulled out of the room. From an 8-year-old, those words were heavier than any standardized test that we were going to take. And I realized he wasn't rejoicing history. He was rejecting ownership. No one had ever connected the story to his story. And so I went to my pastor, who was the pastor of the church, and I started talking with him about the history of the community. And I found out that the package that their parents and their great parents were wrapped in was nothing but pain, the pain of slavery. And they wanted to forget it. So I started interviewing different people in the community, asking them about why did they not want to hear their story, and so are their stories. And so I found that when the emancipation of freedom was offered to those who could get it, several of them walked off the plantations, and there were so many who could not go anyplace. They had no place to go. They had no money to go anyplace. So they stayed there and they worked for small wages. And then the industrial season came. I call it a season. And so more began to walk off because they were going into the north. Like my relatives, my uncles went to Gary, Indiana, and worked in factories there, the oil factories, the coal factories, whatever the factories were. That's what they were doing. My father chose to stay in the South, but that's where they migrated. And so they didn't have time to think about what was different on the plantation and what was different in this new land I call of the North. And so, but they saw privileges and they saw money because many of them worked for the car companies, factories. And so they made a lot of money. And so they progressed. And so they began to say, well, we're not going to worry about schools. We'll just let the teachers take care, who were all pretty much white teachers. And so that's what they did. They did not pick up their history anymore. These were grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. And so therefore their children didn't want to hear it because they were in a new land, if we could say it that way. They were in a new land. They could buy designer clothes. They could do all those things. So why talk about slavery? Why talk about the past? And I wanted to say, but our history doesn't start with slavery. It starts way before slavery. Let me tell you some of these people. And then I found this book. One of my university students gave me this book. It was called Southeast Indiana Trail to Freedom, Underground Railroad Driving Tour. And so I thought, if I'm going to talk to these students and I'm going to raise the reading scores, I need to know more about the history of Indiana and where they're coming from and why they didn't want to know their story. So every weekend, for 3 years, I went on this trail of Indiana. And I would come back and share with them their ancestors and the story that came from Africa all the way to Indiana and the freedom that they had and why we had so much to enjoy and to celebrate. So that day, I stopped being just a literacy educator. I became a liberator of narratives. So I'm going to stop right there because if we don't own our stories, this is what I told my students, if we don't own our stories, someone else will write it for us. And I refuse to let anyone write their story for you. And in this school, this year, you're going to learn about your story. So I called the mom in and said, your son doesn't want to know the story. And she started crying. And she said, I'm so sorry, Dr. Levert. She said, but I know that you will teach them. And I said, but you have to teach it also. So I got to talk with the mother, the grandmother, the grandfather, some of the cousins, and the parents who would refuse to come to the school, they started coming. In 1 year, we moved the school from an F school to a B school with all those kids that they felt could not become successful. So I'm going to stop right there and then I can, if you call me again, I can talk about the framework that I used to move us from that F school to a B school that had nothing to do with learning to read, but everything to do with learning to read. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Levert. That is beautiful. That is at the heart of what we're talking about here. How come somebody is not interested in story? How come somebody is not interested, not just in story, but in their story, learning about the past? That is something fundamentally important because that is a question that is requiring an answer. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell so much on that because there are people that know better than me to do that. I would have gone to Dr. Denkus, but first we need to honor the ladies first. So, Reverend Gloria.
So lovely to see you, Dr. Gwen. I've missed you. And Brother Negos, as always, happy to see you also. So I greet everybody who's listening. I greet all of you there. Brother Obehi, always, right on time. Alafia, as we say in my language, Akabo. I greet you not only with my voice, but with the voices of those who stand behind me, the many mothers and fathers, the storytellers, the healers, the griots, the ones who were not allowed to speak, and the ones who spoke in code, in prayer, in song, and in silence. So as we gather here once again at the Diaspora event, which is the highlight of my day on the days that we meet, we're stepping into something deeper than a conversation. To me, this is a healing ceremony into recovery, into homecoming of voice and soul. This is an urgency. There's an urgency about our topic today, a spiritual necessity about owning our narratives. We are so ready for this, but we still have obstacles, overcoming that resistance to our own traditions. There's a wound that bleeds quietly in many of our communities. The difficulty so many Africans in the diaspora have to embrace their tradition. The question to ask is, why do we continue to mistrust our own spiritual systems and cultural heritage, but quickly adopt what was used to erase us and to enslave us? We are suspicious of our Ifa traditions, afraid of Orisha, disconnected from traditions and practices that speak our names back into wholeness, what the Yorubas call Aoriki. And that is a poetic way of calling a person into their wholeness by praising their lineage. It's a vibration of power. Our histories were distorted through colonization. We were renamed, our pain commodified, our brilliance hidden behind walls of shame. We became refugees in our own bodies, uncertain of our truth, that our truth had value. Let's be honest, we have been conditioned to reject ourselves, and we continue to do this. This is what has to stop. We inherited religions, trauma. We have been shamed into forgetting who we are. And many of us are afraid of our own power. But even in silence, our stories lived. But here's the thing, the very systems we feared are often the medicine we need. A Yoruba elder once said, a religion received through fear or trauma cannot bring true peace or harmony. That is why reclaiming our narratives is not selfish. It is sacred healing. It's an offering to your bloodline. You know, our stories lived in our hips when we danced. We can tell some stories with them hips. In our food when we cooked. I mean, food is sacred, it's medicine in most cultures. In the stubborn joy we carried through in our sorrows. All our stories have still lived on. They can't put our story. The only people who can erase our stories are us by not telling them. When you tell the truth of your life, when you speak of the betrayals and the beauty, you clear the path behind you for your children, and you light the way forward for those who haven't yet been born. You know, when we don't remember, don't educate ourselves, don't enlighten ourselves about who we are, the disconnection continues to drive how we operate in the world. We put on masks that don't represent us or enhance our well-being. We participate in the further destruction of us as a people. Case in point, a well-known politician here in the UK who has made it a purpose of her life to denigrate her Nigerian culture and birthland, and has convinced herself that this is the best she is. And she's being supported by people around her who want her to think of herself in such awful ways. Why do we do this? And the sad thing about it is that she has young children. What is she teaching them? What is she leaving behind for her children who are part of that culture? She's teaching them to self-hate. So her lineage continues in that vein. The next generation carry that burden. It's outrageous. I feel like I want to just grab her and say, sis, do you know what you're doing? You need to go home and let some elder person rub you down with something, because, you know, what's going on? You know, what is this? We do not tell our stories to become influencers, you know. Our agenda is completely different. We tell stories to become remembered, We tell stories so that the earth remembers our footprints. Our footprints. There's a well-known writer called Pema Chodron. She tells us that only when we know our own darkness well can we can we be present with the darkness of others. Our stories allows us to sit with that darkness with grace, as we always have done. We are the most graceful people as Black people, as people in the diaspora. If only we know how loved we are by the divine. That, that, that is something that comes out just how we step into the world. Other people see our light. So why will we be the ones to put our own lights out? There's stories, we have to tell our own stories. We have to read and find out about our forefathers. All the information is there. Of all the harms of the internet, that's one of the blessings of it. You can find out information. When you tell your story, you're not just telling it to the world, you're whispering it to your Ori, which is the Yoruba says is your divine consciousness. You are saying, I see you, I honor you, I will no longer abandon you. You are correcting the spell of erasure. You are bringing your lineage in alignment with truth. Let me pause here and not take up all the space.
Thank you so much, sister. You see, this is it. This is the call. We are responding to a call here. Of course, we have had the time to be able to talk in private, both with you and also with Dr. Nengus, talking about the importance of this thing that we are doing here. People need to understand that we are responding to a call. This is a medicine that we must drink. We must drink this medicine to heal ourselves, to reclaim ourselves, our history, our narrative. I'm talking about reclaiming our narrative. That is where I'm going to drag in Dr. Nengus. You see, people are not even aware of that thing that they need to claim, their identity, their history, their story. What do you think how do you think we should start approaching that? What is your take on the conversation of today? Let people start from there.
My name, I'm Dr. Nagus Rudison Imhotep. I throw PhD and doctor in front of it because I earned it.
That's right. That's right.
I had a person the other day said, "No, some of those just call me by my first name," and he was a councilman. And I said, "Well, hell, Councilman so-so," and he said, "Oh," I said, "Well, I call you councilman because you're councilman, right?" He said, "Yeah." You mean I gotta call you doctor? I said, "Yeah, I heard it." So don't start the mess, dude. You know. But thank you for this opportunity and looking at storytelling. It's a part of my life, a part of what I do with my business, and is storytelling. And as others have stated before, we have to control our own narrative, because if we don't control our own narrative, someone else will write a story about you that might not be true about who you are. Point in case, here in the state of Iowa, they have a book called Outside In, which is a historical book of Black people in the state of Iowa from the 1880s to I think it stopped like 1960. And it was a story about a super athlete that came out of University of Iowa State. His name was Jack Trice. Jack Trice was the first Black player to ever play football at Iowa A&M. Now they're Iowa State University. But Jack Trice lost his life in a game against the University of Minnesota. And in this article, the Jewish writer who wrote this particular story about Trice and the incident, how he lost his life from a football game against Minnesota. At the end of the story, he stated that the author stated that Trice died due to injuries that occurred on the field. and it said it was not intentional with the wounds that he received, which is the lie straight from the pit of hell. The man was beaten, his shoulder was dislocated in the game, and the coach put him back in the game, and he gets pounded and stomped on by other players from Minnesota because he was the only black player on the field, and went to the infirmary in Minnesota. This was occurred back in like 1920, 22. And this man, the infirmary stated that he was okay to go home. So they got on the train with the rest of the football players and went back to Ames, Iowa. And when they put him in his bedroom, they came back the next day and found him dead. So this particular narrative was stating that it was not intentional, like I stated earlier, it was a bold-faced lie. And I wrote a particular article entitled "The Public Execution of Jack Trice," and I published it here on the local paper and caught a lot of flack. But what happened was that one of the descendants of Jack Trice, one of his grandsons, called me and contacted me on LinkedIn and said, "Man, thank you for telling this story about my grandfather, because what they saw in that book is not the true narrative of what occurred, because that time in this country in the early 1920s, there were a bunch of hanging and race riots going on all across the United States. And someone else writing the story is going to make it sound like it's, it wasn't all that bad. He just got hurt and he died. No, that's not the case. We have to tell our own stories, and we have to come to the realization that we get entangled up into some of these things, and people will have you moving in the wrong direction, having you to love your oppressor and hate the victim. So it's something about returning to our culture, returning to our roots. That Sankofa bird constantly sticks is embedded in my brain. It's about returning to our roots and learning and living from that. I remember a poem by an author named John Pepper Clark, but Kerdemo, he was from Nigeria. And this poem, he states, it's about return, and it made me think of Sankofa. He said, "Home is where the heart lies, though the feet may stray. The drumbeat of the ancestors call us back each day. Across the seas of memory, beyond the winds of loss, the spirit hears the tom-tom and answers, for it must. What is forgotten is not gone. In every name we bear, the echoes of the homeland linger in the air. Return, not in body alone, but in soul and tongue, in song. Reclaim the truth of Blackness and know where you belong." We belong with our people. We are, even though we've been separated through seas, we are the original people. And we don't need nobody else telling our story. We have to let it out, And I'm just looking at how our people have been taught to run away from anything that's African. Anything that's African is negative. From the Western narrative, and I'm looking at how sometimes our people are so entangled in religion that where we're no earthly good for people that we live around, Because to tell the truth, people don't need religion. Religion needs people. Okay? They're just corporations and they need your money to thrive. Religions don't make you a better person. Intelligence and kindness does. Religion doesn't feed the poor. Good people with big hearts do that. Just remember.
Thank you so much for that. Because of the importance of the story itself, the narrative itself, as it were, and because of who you are as a storyteller, as an expert in the field, I would like you to respond to another question before I pass the mic to Latifat. The question had to do with what you think the mainstream media may have done in misrepresenting the lived experiences of the African diaspora, or by extension, the African people, and the effect that has on us today, or that has on the world today, in how African and people of African descent are perceived in the world. What do you say about that?
Well, I'm not going to, yeah, I'm going to jump on it. Just most of the time, it's nothing really to laugh at. It's saddening for people to think that individuals with a darker hue are inferior to those who have lighter hue or come from the northern portion of this planet. But that's not the case. The people who control the media shows just what they'll show. I remember here in the 80s, or late 80s, early 90s, Bill Cosby had the Cosby Show. They showed the narrative of a black doctor. The father, his wife was an attorney, and the children all were finally kept living in upscale living, upper class, and most of the media always showed something of black people here in America, dirt poor, with nothing and not educated. And here they flipped the script and threw a narrative where here's a doctor who's a father and the mother's a lawyer, and here's all these children, 3 or 4 children that they have, and all of them are grading school, going to college. That was a narrative. I think this media here in the United States said they got to shut that down because that's not the way they wanted it to be. The intentions of this nation, if we go back to historically from 1638, the Maryland edict on exclusion to exclude blacks from having any access to the amenities of society. The 1740 South Carolina Negro Act was established after a rebellion, the Stono Rebellion in 1739 to suppress black people. As a matter of fact, they didn't even look at us as human beings. When I found out something just recently about Augustus Belmont Schoenberg, who was the founder of the Belmont Stakes, when I found out his story, I almost had lost my mind. My blood pressure went up. This person, Augustus Belmont Schoenberg, is the founder of the Belmont Stakes. They have this horse race, thoroughbred race, the Triple Crown, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. Belmont was the same person that started the New York Democratic Party. He also was he owned the largest plantation in the United States, and it was in Brooklyn, New York. He's also the founder of Wall Street, one of the founders of Wall Street. And he was so wicked to where other plantation owners would whoop their slaves, he wouldn't do that. He would take the people, tie them to a stake, and burn them alive. And he considered black people as nothing other than cattle. So if we let them continue to write their narrative, they're gonna write their story about their victories. Like the brothers and sisters in the hood say, long as the hunter has a gun and he writes a narrative, he tells his story. But like my younger brother would say, but it ain't no fun if the rabbit got a gun. If the rabbit starts shooting, the hunter might be in trouble. So I'm just putting it that way.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. And that is why we are here too. That is why we are here. In that we are going to realize that it is on us to reclaim that story, to dig it up, to reclaim it as our heritage, not from the point of view of just lamenting about it or complaining about it, but to use it also as a point to heal ourselves, to reconnect among ourselves, the over 200 million people of African in the diaspora. We need it as an instrument of empowerment. All right, now that is where I'm going to be pulling in Latifat. Okay, we want to learn what you think about using story or storytelling or using our story as a way of reconnecting who we are, so we can build together, because we want to be able to heal ourselves, but standing on our experience. You see, Reverend Gloria was talking about before. Of course, she mentioned it. She didn't go in detail about that. She said she greets you in the name using Yoruba language, Alafia. Then she said she brings you greeting from all the people around her. So what Reverend Gloria is talking about, all the people around her mean also all the people around her from generation to generation, the ancestor, the story, everything that make her who she is. That is the story. Which is to say, it's not just about only you standing here. Because if you are just isolated as only you are going to be taken out almost immediately. But if your story is about thousands of years of coming, they have no power of erasing that. But it is on us to reclaim that, as we have the foundation upon which to stand, the foundation that we can use to connect us to start the process of healing. What do you say about that?
I think they're not always far from the same things over and over again. I'll beg to say again, every time, whenever we wake up, I can identify as a storyteller today. My brother, you can identify as a storyteller tomorrow. But you know what? Every one of us is a storyteller. We tell stories, our daily lives. You might not want to admit it. When you go to the hospital and they tell you, how can we help you? You're already telling a story from the door. When a child goes to school, when the teacher asks, how are you feeling today? That child is telling a story. When a family is living together, the husband wants to interact with the wife. You're telling a story. Even in bed, when you're having sex, we're telling a story. So at every point in time, stories are around us, right? For every point in time, we are people of stories. We carry stories. And it's not gonna stop. So for many more generations to come, we will continue to carry the stories. But the point is, what kind of stories are we going to be telling? Right? So there's a difference. We can tell stories, but what kind of stories are we going to be telling? Are we going to be telling the stories based on truth or based on lies? The choice is ours, right? I can reflect that Reverend Gloria was talking about Kemi Badenoch, was saying a lot of things about Nigeria and continue to talk. All of this is very political. You can understand that that person without even having to look at her twice. There are issues as to our identity. There are a lot of people that they never grew up with that reaffirmation that this is your identity, and no one is going to take it away from you. But you see, Western education, civilization has gotten so deep and ingrained into our systems that a lot of people now begin to question their identity. They begin to question their roots. They begin to question, the branches that makes their community. They begin to say, I don't want to identify as me being part of this community. I want to be an outcast to this community. But guess what? When we want to talk about those roots, you have to tell the story. So, your question, my brother, what kind of stories are we going to be telling? Are we going to be telling stock stories, or are we going to be telling authentic stories? There are some stories about us that people make. For example, I'm gonna go a little bit tribalistic. People would say that Yorubas are maybe lazy sometimes, right? And this is a stock story. This is a dominant narrative. But when we look at that statement, that might not really be the case, right? It's until you begin to relate with other Yorubas, right? Um, Dr. Nengus was just mentioning earlier too that they paint this story to us, and then they paint the story about people back home to us, and we begin to look at each other like we hate each other. We can't even stand each other. Why? Because of misinformation. So as we continue to carry stories, we also don't want to mislead people. So I think that one thing we should continue to be an anchor of is authors of authentic, credible stories. So I want to pass on authentic, credible stories to many more generations to come. So they don't so no one tells them, oh, that's a lie. I can't fact check it. So I'm gonna stop from there for now. But thank you.
Dr. Gwendolyn, this is a question. The question is like this. The self-hate. The self-hate that we sometimes have among us. I'm trying to see that is any way we can even look at the psychology behind it, what is the reason behind it, and what we might do about it. You see, Michael S. was saying, who taught you to hate yourself? To hate yourself from the hair of your head to the sole of your feet. So
Brother Obehi, can I quickly jump on that?
Okay.
Can
So
I
the
jump
question
on
therefore
that?
is for
Because
you.
you mentioned
Because wait. You see, why I'm
you,
asking you the question is because you made mention of Kemi. You see, 2 days ago, I spoke to my wife. I said, look at this lady. Why is she doing this? How can you be self-hating yourself and brandishing the people that you belong to in this way for the sake of politics? Are you selling out yourself? Selling out the people you are part of for what? For peanuts? So can you help us understand that better?
so I'll go back again to an aphorism I mention all the time about you cannot plant yam and expect to harvest maize. It is not possible, right? All of this will take you back to Kemi's childhood. What kind of parents did she have, right? And I'm not judging anybody as to, maybe she wasn't raised well, but that's not the point. You know, she must have had a lot of, you know, I don't want to say, I don't want to say unhealthy childhood because that's also very relative. But I want to say that there is like some unresolved issues that Kemi had growing up that she may have had growing up with identity, with her not being able to affirm and say, you know what, this is it. This is the truth. There's one truth. I am Nigerian. Yes, I am African, or I am whosoever I am. You can never lie to yourself, even if you lie to people, right? So it is about the fact that, as we continue to grow, as we continue to live and exist in the world, as we continue to associate with people around us, who are we associating with? Badenoch already made it clear that I don't want to associate with Nigerians, which is fine. We're okay with that. If, as a matter of fact, that's okay. If that's our reality, we'll take it. It's not even we're not crying about it. We're not, and it's that's a Kemi issue. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody is gonna lie to me that I'm not Nigerian. Nobody is gonna lie to me that I'm not black. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's the individual differences. It's a personality makeup of how Kemi decided to, train herself after being trained by her parents. Yoruba people would say, Reverend Gloria, maybe you should help me with that Yoruba stuff that say, Toba Tun, Toba Bini, I forgot. How do they say it?
Okay.
Can you help me? Like,
I'm trying to think about it. I can't formulate it in my head right now.
no. I think it's the one that they say, Toba Bini, a young man to Rebi. So when they give birth to you, you have to,
Yeah,
you have to give birth to yourself again. And that word,
that's
the
it.
manifestation of that statement is that, you might have the worst parent even, but you have to come with that. You have to come with that mindset that this is who I want to become. Your parents will do their job, whether they did a good job, whether they did a bad job. That's on them. But you see, you have that onus on yourself. What do I want to be? And that's where the issues of identity will begin to stem up. As an adult, it's not out of place to say that she doesn't know what she's doing. She does. It's very clear that she knows what she's doing. Some people might be seeking attention with that. Oh, now I already disown Nigeria, so everybody's gonna be talking about me. The personality makeup is where I want us to go. As to someone saying, I don't want to identify with a set of people, which is fine and it's okay. So I'm gonna rest now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that. We leave it there. So we're not going to take it any further than that. But we know that it is important. The fact that we were supposed to promote the culture that we share. But anyway, we leave it like that. That is a coming issue, like you said. We're not taking it further than that. Now, let me go to Gwendolyn. Dr. Gwendolyn, I want you to help us understand how we might be able to use the power of storytelling or our narrative, as it were, as that is own it and use it to build our influence on our position in the world, because we're all saying all what we are saying now because we want to be better represented in the world and we want to better position ourselves in the world and being able to own our power, own our own our agency. We don't need somebody coming around to tell the story for us, because when they do that, they always write it, narrative from their point of view. But I am not just an object. I have my mouth. I've had an experience. I should be able to say it from how I'm seeing it. So how can we use our narrative to be able to own this in our place in this globalized world?
I think that's a very good question, and it's a very strong question. But I want us to go back to the third grader who said, I don't want to know about Black people. But let's go back even further from his grandparents, his great grandparents, who lived in slavery and then moved into the industrial area or era with colonized mindsets, and no one to help them frame their feelings about holding on to a culture that is so rich. Their ancestors coming from an era of richness, but they don't have a framework to put all of that into. So I had to move them into a place to shift their minds. And so I turned to the work of Dr. Greg Carr, because I'm in an Africana class room I've been in it for 5 years. But I turned to Dr. Greg Carr's African-centered framework because he gave me and my boys a map to reclaim our place in the world. And let me go through it. Dr. Carr organizes Africana and diaspora life into 6 conceptual categories. And this is what I did for the boys at my school as a principal. It's very important for us to move away from content and become a liberator of the narrative. And so we started off with, this is me as the principal talking with my students. Number 1, the social structure. What social, economic, political, and cultural environment shaped that community? They had to know that in order for them to have an understanding of why they needed to love themselves and the people that they came from. So my boys learned the forces shaping their lives and how they could shape those forces in return. And I want to say that again. My boys learned the forces shaping their lives And so for people to say, I don't want to know about Black people, I hate this, I don't do this, that means that they have not learned the forces shaping their lives. And those forces are social, economic, political. Right now, we're talking about political forces that could shape our lives unless we get hold or take hold of our stories. And the cultural environment that shapes the community, still sitting back and saying, well, I'll let them do it, or sitting back and saying, well, I have everything that I need. I don't need anything else, not understanding how all of this is shaping their lives. That's the social structure. Then number 2 is the governance structure. How did Africans organize themselves back in the past? We were an organized country. We were an organized group of people. And so how did they organize themselves? I know Dr. Carr and a lot of the Nubians are going to Kemet right now. They're there right now. And they're learning about how we were organized as Africans. But think about that group of people that moved into Indiana that didn't know this history. They're walking around with colonized mindsets and just listening to what social media is saying to them. So my students, they discovered leadership models rooted in community care, not just control. Number 3, ways of knowing. How did they develop systems of thought? And that's when I brought in the work of Professor Feuerstein, who believes that the brain can be changed. The brain is not fixed. It can be modified. That meant that my boys weren't low performing, but they were undeveloped thinkers who could be rewired for success. And if that's not being taught to our adults, how can they shift their mindset from being colonized? I became their mediator, not just their teacher. I didn't hand them answers. I asked them questions that made them wrestle with ideas and justify their reasoning. I taught them to name the mental steps that they were taking, building metacognition where they were thinking about their thinking. I used real life analogies and problem solving scenarios to learning their learning felt connected to the world. Because if their learning was not connected to the world, then they couldn't change over from the colonized mindset. I slowed their thinking down so that they could see the process, not just chase the product. And over time, I watched them move from reacting to reasoning, from guessing to explaining. And then I moved into the science and technology. What tools shape their world and how? They learned that innovation has always been part of their DNA, from ancient engineering to modern inventions. Number 5, the movement and memory. How did they preserve and transmit history? We explored how ex-slaved Africans braided escape maps into their hair and turned spirituals into coded messages, proof that memory is a survival tool. And then the last one is cultural meaning making. How did they creatively express identity and meaning? We studied art, we studied music, we studied storytelling as acts of resistance and self-definition. And over all of it, the question was asked from each one of those guiding points and the conceptual framework, how does this free us? For you to say, I don't want to know about Black people, to saying, I want to know more. And how is it going to free me in my community? How is it going to free me when I go to high school, when I go to college, when I move into the world? How will all this move into freeing me? And so at this point, those kids who were in that 3rd grade classroom, they've graduated from college. Some of those kids are doctors. Some of them are lawyers. Some of them have their own businesses. And my sister a few weeks ago saw what the mother of this 3rd grader, and she said, the mother said, "Where is Dr. Levert?" And so she said, well, she left the university, she moved to Texas, and she said, she helped me to turn not only my family around, but she helped me to heal them. And I will forever be grateful for that. So the main thing is we have to have a conceptual framework for people to make the change from being in a colonized mindset to understand where we came from, and we have the right to continue to move forward. So I hope that helps.
A lot. It helps a lot. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Now, I just want to add that the power of story is inestimable. Is seen. How do I put it? We cannot quantify the power that they have in our life. There is this saying that if you treat an ego like a chicken, it will behave like a chicken. You don't even need to do anything at all. Just tell the ego that it's a chicken. It will behave like the chicken. Let me explain. The day that the ego is born, which is the same way, maybe the same way that the chicken is born, they are just like little chick, no? They look alike. If you take the ego and mix it with the chicken and feed the ego with the same story that you feed the chicken, the ego might never fly, even though the ego is supposed to fly. Why? The ego will believe that it's supposed to behave like a chicken. You see, there is something powerful about understanding where we are coming from. When we do, we're still going to have challenges. But knowing that our ancestors have had challenges too, they have been able to overcome that, give us the impetus to try out more ways to be able to find the solution. But if we are fed the story that we have never done anything, our ancestors have never done anything before, it becomes more challenging for us that if it have never been done before in our lineage, what gives us the courage that we can do it now? We have been slaves all along. That is the narrative. That in the African diaspora, it is told that our story started from slavery. Now, in Africa, we are also told that our story started from colonialism. You see, you might not understand the dimension, how big this can have effect in our psychology. In that we are made to believe that we are worth nothing. We begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to doubt everything, that we cannot do anything reasonable in this world. That is the information we are fed. But what does knowing our story, how do we even begin to know our story? We need to go back and start deconstructing the framework. We need to interact with ourselves. In many occasions, I've talked to particularly scholars within Africana study in the US, that it is imperative that they liaise with other scholars in Africa. And I'm not saying that those in Africa haven't gotten the same disinforming information, but because they are living in Africa, they have more chances of able to interact with the local reality and able to find out, because not everything has been destroyed in Africa. Believe me, not everything has been destroyed, because Africa is the cradle of humanity. There are a lot of things that the Europeans haven't yet understand, not to talk of even deconstructing it. So we still have the chance of able to rewrite the history and recover ourselves. But we must work together. We must let the story, our understanding of the past, guide us. Not just of this surface information that we have out there, that because that is how they want to tell the story, of course, it helps them to be able to put us under control. That should not be the way that we understand ourselves. We should make an effort to dig deeper about our experiences as a people, to understand how our ancestors have been able, over thousands of years, to be able to overcome common challenges like cultivation, understanding the climate, for example, medicine. How have they been able to survive? If we manage to get that, then we can know how to survive even in today's world. So I'm going to put that again to Dr. Negus. we are moving on the face of the solution now. We understand that these things are challenging. We understand that we have gotten all this misinformation now. We understand that the misinformation is continuously going on. Let me share information with you. If you go to YouTube and also on Facebook, most importantly, because I've been researching about it, I'm going to do something on it. I'm going to create a work on it, but I've not decided yet on that. The information that is shared or that is allowed to circulate about and within the African diaspora community and among Africa are very negative information. The information about nudity, women that are going naked on the street, information of Africans doing extraordinary, horrible things, gory images. Facebook is aware of this information, but they don't take it down. This information are sort of hype, and they are giving algorithms in a way that they go viral. And because they go viral, those who create this type of information make a lot of money, which means that the tools that we use is helping us to denigrate ourselves. It's helping us to destroy ourselves. And because we are making money from it, we think that it's a good thing, but it is not a good thing. We need to know that we are destroying ourselves through a tool that was created by somebody. There are also bad things like that happening among white people, but Facebook do not show it. There are law here in Europe, for example, that if information denigrate the image of a European person, that image should not be seen on social media. If you show it, it will be flagged. But how come people are showing those images in Africa? In the same platform, it is not flagged. They say they don't know. Maybe that is what they will say sometime. So the question I'm asking you, Dr. Negus, is how do we go about reconstructing ourselves, using what we know to help ourselves? Because nobody is coming to help us. Nobody is coming to help us. Please share with us.
I got you, brother. From my experience, the antidote to our problem is knowledge of self and become love of self. I know the statement or question was asked earlier about self-hatred and the way the media constantly shows negative perceptions of who Black people are. As a child born in 1960, here in the U.S. on TV, if you saw anybody Black on TV back in the 60s, they were either labeled working as a slave, a hired hand, or someone of low esteem, no one in a position of power or authority. And it made me think about my own experience as a youth, because I remember in 1966, we had a family reunion here in Marshalltown, Iowa, and I was born in Texas. My parents were from Iowa, and we came up for a family reunion, and it was 1966. All my parents and my uncles and aunts and cousins and grandparents and even a great grandparent was there, and we were all together. And I remember my great grandmother, Clara Lavender, and she had a heavy Southern drawl. I remember I was named after her namesake, like my father. His name was Claire, because her name was Clara, and I was born Claire Jr. And she would always kind of give me an extra little hug or something, because I think I was her namesake. And she, I remember we was dining, and she grabbed some cornbread with her hand and pinched it up real small like that. And then she grabbed some greens, and she told me, "Come here." And I went over to her, and she said, "Open your mouth." And I opened my mouth, and she gave me that food. And she said, "How did it taste, baby?" I said, "Well, it tastes good, Emma." She said, "Well, that's the way my mama taught me to eat. She was from Africa." And I remember that. And then I remember coming that same year, we went to church on a Sunday and we came back to the house after coming from church, and my father and mother had me and my brothers and sisters, and we're watching 60 Minutes. And they were showing the civil rights movement and dogs jumping and barking on, biting people, and police throwing black people in paddy wagons. And after the show was over, I went over to my dad and told him, I said, Dad, it's not our fault we're Negroes. And my dad jumped up and said, man, you'd be proud to be a Negro. I said, well, tell me why. And when he did that, he a tear came to his eye. He started crying because he saw what I was seeing. I saw all of this negative views of who we are as a people and how we were just water hosed and dogs biting and police with shotguns on us. But my parents, my father and my mother went and purchased this thing called the Negro Encyclopedia by Ebony Magazine. And that was our knowledge of that was our Facebook, our information, where we could dig up information about and find out about black people, because the encyclopedia had nothing but information about black people all the way through from A to Z. And I fell in love with my history, with my culture. And then my parents brought in exchange students that went to Texas Southern University, and all of these exchange students were coming from Central Africa, West Africa, and sometimes they stayed at our house for a week or two. And that introduced me to our ancestors, people who are related to us on the other side of the ocean that they talk about so negatively. But all I saw was these black people that I met from Africa were college graduates. They were going on grad school. They were doing things and traveling around the world doing things. And it opened up my mind to say, hey, I'm not accepting the story that they tell about me. I'm going to find out about my own people. And when I find out, I'm here to tell whoever has ears to hear that they need to know who we are. You need to know who you are. And if you know who you are, you don't hate yourself. I remember even in my early 20s, I was sitting under a tree watching some old black men playing dominoes. They drinking their beer and playing dominoes, had their game going. And one man was talking about the Bible and said something about Jesus. And I said, well, Jesus was a black man. This old World War I brother. I mean, he was a World War I, no wonder. He was still around. And he said, I give anybody $50 if they punch that nigga in his mouth who just said Jesus was a black man. And didn't nobody punch me or nothing, but he had his own concept that Eurocentric colonized mindset to say, oh, I got to, somebody hit that boy in his mouth for making a comment like that. Because he was taught that something contrary. He was taught to hate himself. Even though he went over and fought in Europe during World War I for, not for the United States, he fought with France. Because the United States was so racist, they wouldn't let black soldiers fight with white soldiers.
That is why we are never going to allow somebody to take that privilege of telling your story. Somebody was making a statement yesterday. Say, how come even in different universities, people that are teaching African history, that are Russians, European, how come they mastered our language so well that they are the master of that story? How come? We are not teaching their story. They are teaching our story. Can we see that is too much of a privilege we are giving out?
I got to rebound on that, bro, because I remember when in 1989, I was doing some undergrad work at Texas Southern University, and we had Dr. Yusuf bin Yakanan, who's an African scholar, big time African scholar, icon in Black and Africana studies, and he did a lecture on his book, The Black Man and the Now. And the thing about it, the semester prior, I was taking a class there on African antiquities, and we had a British Caucasian man that was teaching at Texas Southern, and he was teaching African antiquities. And in the lecture, he made the comment that the nose of the Sphinx eroded with the sands of time. While I was in the classroom, I jumped up and hollered, "That's a lie!" And that's a lie. That's straight. And the teacher told me to shut up. And then to hear some of the students telling me, "Oh, shut up, man. He the professor. He knows. You don't know." I said, "No, he's lying." And I disrupted the class. They had to come get me out the classroom. And I left the classroom. But the following month, Black History, the following year, because it was the end of that semester, but that new year, Black History Month came up, and Dr. Ben was there, and he did his lecture on the Black Man and the Now. And after he finished his lecture, I raced to that microphone. I ran to that microphone. I said, "Well, Dr. Ben, we thank you for coming to Texas Southern and this beautiful lecture on the Black Man and the Now. But I have a query for you, sir." He said, "Go ahead, son." And I said, "I'm a student here at Texas Southern, and I just got through taking a class on African antiquities. And we had a European professor told us that the nose of the Sphinx eroded with the sands of time." And I'm not going to use the profanity he used. He said he's a GD lie. That's the problem with these. We got students at Black universities taking classes on Black studies, but they whitewashing Black studies. African studies had always had to be contraband in this country because they don't want us to know who we are. Because when we know who we are, we ain't going to take this SHIT no more.
That is good enough. I'm not going to say anything to that. That is powerful. That is powerful for those who want to learn. Thank you so much for that. Now, looking at it from another angle, now I'm going to be passing the mic to Reverend Gloria, because we're talking about also healing now, because we're talking about using our story as instrument of healing, recovering ourselves. We're talking about it at all because we want to be able to use it as instrument to heal ourselves. So, Reverend Gloria, what do you think of that? Using story, using our knowing who we are to be able to walk in this world in a different way, in a different kind of light. What is your take on that?
Thank you. Thank you all, brothers and sisters. What a very rich contribution from everybody. There's so much I wanted to respond to everything everybody said, but I'll leave it. And okay, for me, as an ancestral lineage healing practitioner, I understand that owning our stories is ancestral healing. I mean, the two go along together. When we reclaim our voices, we are not just expressing, we are also in the process of healing the disconnection that colonialism, slavery, migration, and religious trauma created. And we cannot minimize or underplay the impact of all these things on us. I mean, and unfortunately, we're living in times where we're being re-traumatized. We're not having spaces to heal. And we also are re-traumatizing our own selves. And this is the really sad part of it. But when you involve yourself with ancestral lineage healing, it is the spiritual practice of making peace with our bloodlines, recovering suppressed wisdom, and restoring the flow of power through generations. It asks us to remember the ones we've forgotten, to lift the names of those buried beneath silence, and to offer our own voices as bridges between the past and the future. Somebody said, well, if I don't know who my ancestor, you don't have to know them. Just call on them. Know that they existed. Believe that. So you don't have to have any names, because people always try to make everything so complicated so that they don't have to engage in it and turn it into some drama. It's very simple. It's in you. It's in your DNA. When you call on your mother, if you think about, I remember my mother. She was, oh, what a wonderful woman she is. I thank her every day of my life. And she'll wake up in the morning and she'll come straight to my room. I was her only daughter. She had these two sons who were like, just, that's why she named me Gloria. After they come, it was like Gloria and Excelsior. Oh, hallelujah, glory. Anyway, that's another story. And she would come into my bedroom and she would say, Gloria, Gloria, do you know who you are? And I'm like, hey, yeah, mommy, I'm Gloria. No, 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 no. She said, you are somebody. Even my names, even the names they called me, Abike, Oyetoke, Oladitoke, everything, meaning that I'm to be pampered. I'm precious. I mean, I believed I was somebody. No matter what situation I was in, I hear those names. And if I was down, she would come to me and say, my little angel, what makes you sad? Do you know that you're the father of, you're the mother, your mother's mother is this, you are the child of this, she will call what we call Oriki, that where they praise your name, call every lineage you're from. And I hear those, now that I'm doing this work, I hear all those things she said to me like 30 years ago. They're all coming back to me. It doesn't leave you. That's the thing about these things. Ancestral lineage healing, like I said, is the spiritual practice of making peace with our bloodlines, recovering suppressed wisdom, and restoring the flow of power through generations. It asks us to remember the ones we've forgotten. When you speak your story, you call the names of the ones who were not allowed to speak. You break intergenerational patterns of silence and shame. You become an instrument of remembrance. There's a Yoruba saying that says, "Ẹni tí kò mọ ìtàn rẹ̀, kì ó mọ ibi tí ó ń lọ." One who doesn't know their story does not know where they're going. You have to know your story. Otherwise, you'll be telling somebody else's story as well as them telling your story. So you've got to know your story. And that story, because again, I have people say when I do this work, people who are new to it, and say, I don't know my story. I said, forget about all that. Your story is in you. So, you give honor to your ancestors. They ask me, how should I do this? I say, every morning, call on your Ori, which is your inner divine consciousness. When you wake up in the morning, rather than reach for that phone, which we all do, just take a few minutes. Call on your Ori, my Ori. Ask your Ori for instructions and guidance. What am I meant to do today? You can call it God, you can call it whatever you want to call it, that you're in your intuition, whatever you want to call it, but know that you're calling on something higher than you. Honoring your ancestors. If you want to do little practices, you can take a little bit of water, pour it at your front door. She's pouring libation. You can pray, invite your ancestors for them to walk with you this day, for them to guide you, for them to keep you focused. You have to have a practice. You can't just run around wild. There's craziness out there. There are all kinds of energies, and they're looking to come into people. And I'm not trying to make it all woo-woo but it's real. Some of these people that you're dealing with every day, you step out, okay, I'm not going to say, what I'm really thinking, but we're dealing with some really strange energies out there. My brother is smiling.
That's
Storytelling.
That's
Yeah.
true. All right. Reverend
Let me
Gloria, I'd like you to tell people.
Before I just wind up. Storytelling is not a solo act. It is meant to be witnessed. And in sacred community, your pain is not pathologized. It is honored, like what we're doing here. In the telling others, you remember also yourself. And as we do in this space, this is the power of storytelling. And for those of us in the diaspora, the wound is layered. We were uprooted, renamed, remade, and then told to forget who we were. We were told that African spirituality is evil, that our history began with slavery, and our stories were shameful. We internalized these lies. So now the resistance to our own traditions run deep. So we have to have this conversation. And lastly, a Yoruba traditional elder said, what is not acknowledged will find ways to speak through the body, through dreams, and through dis-ease. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. That is so lovely. That is so lovely. Now, just a last word from you. Tell people how they can also reach out to you, benefit from what you offer. That is important. We will never be able to ignore that, because we are here spending our time. We have services that we render. We are professionals from different areas, like I usually tell people that are listening to us. These people that you are listening to have a way of helping you apart from what you have heard from them. So this moment, each of them will tell you what they are offering, how you can benefit from them. So go on, Reverend Gloria.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. And if there was anything you heard that I said that resonated with you, you can visit my website, gloriaogumbadejo.com, where you'll see my 3 core offers on there, as well as an opportunity to go on a free training on introduction to ancestral lineage healing. I can be found on LinkedIn, and I have a few other things coming up, which I can't remember right now. But yeah, if you go onto my website, you'll find everything there.
All right. Thank you so much for that. You definitely need to find out about Reverend Gloria and what she's offering. Of course, she's also going to be doing a teaching in We Diaspora, which is our international organization dedicated to the African diaspora storytelling. She's going to be offering a course there. So get ready for all of that. All right. So Queen Latifah, that is why we call her sometime. She does storytelling. She writes children's book. Of course, she's an expert in what she's talking about. Unfortunately, she's not able to conclude the conversation with her, but we are with her. We are together in the spirit. So reach out to Latifah on YouTube, on Facebook, where you'll be able to connect to some of our services if you are interested in learning about how to leverage the power of storytelling, or want to maybe write a book or read children's story. All these are what she offers. All right, so Dr. Gwendolyn, what is your final take here, and how can people connect to you in what you do? Please share with us.
Oh, this is so exciting. I've enjoyed so much this, but I have to tell you this when you talk about healing and recovering, because I speak from an educational perspective as a reading specialist. So when our children know who they are through those 6 lenses that I talked about, they stop reading themselves as side characters in someone else's book. And I have found that as a reading specialist, not only as a teacher, but as an administrator, as a university professor, they learn that literacy is more than decoding words, it's decoding the world. And history is not a chain, it's a blueprint. And that their story does not begin with struggle, it begins with structure, strength, and self-definition. James Baldwin says that we should know from whence we came. If we know whence we came, that there are absolutely no limitations to where they can go. So the call to action that I leave today and what I'm doing, I have a new book out, Who Says I Can't? And it talks about, it's a 4-year plan to erase the reading gap and achieve proficiency by 4th grade. And so I have charts and maps and all kinds of graphs to help teachers close the gaps, because we're hearing that 88% of our African-American children are not reading at grade level proficiency. Why aren't they? Because teachers just teach the strategies over and over and over, and they are not helping them retain the information in their thinking. They're not rewiring their thinking. So that's what I'm a master of. Train the mind, retain the strategy. So the call to action is, we can't afford to let the next generation inherit a script that was not written for them. This is not a script. The teachers will have to plan and then implement. We must braid their minds with the maps, and these are the maps that they need, just as our ancestors did. And we must teach them to read the hunter's version, recognize the biases, and write the lion's truth. Because if our children can't write their narratives, someone else will. And the story they get will not be the one that they deserve. We're not just storytellers, we are story shapers. And that's what my book does. It shapes or reshapes the thinking. We are architects of the future. I must say this as I close. If we change the story, we change the future. I grew up in a household where my father was an advocate. He was president of the union for Campbell Soup Company. And he led many people out on strike. And I was a little girl out there handing out flyers and things to help those people. I understood what the union people were up to. So that's what I spent my time doing. Other than going to school, learning how to navigate myself through success. My mother was a poet and she wrote all the time. And she don't get a letter from my mother, because if you did, you were in big trouble. And then my father was president of the union. NAACP. I'm sorry. He was president of the NAACP. So, of course, we were all in the mix of change and being change makers through storytelling. And most of my stories as a children's author were the stories that my mother told us. And I was able to help my students every year that not only my university students, but my kids as a classroom teacher, help them to move into literacy because of the work that my parents had provided for me to be the warrior that I am today. So for the last 2 years, I've committed myself to stay at home and write with power. And so I know some of you are seeing my articles and you're hearing my podcast and things. So I'm doing what my father, my ancestor, who is an ancestor now, my father and my mother left for me to do, to continue the fight. And I'm continuing the fight all over the world. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm so glad to be back with you guys. I've been so busy writing that every time it's time for me to come and talk with you guys, I couldn't. I missed you. And so I called and they said, oh, I'm on the list today. So thank you.
You're back. Thank you.
I'm fighting even harder. So thank you guys.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. All right. So, Dr. Negus, you need to tell the people what is your final take, and tell them how to find you. You definitely have something that you have something in offer. Please go ahead. You are the last speaker today.
Okay. Well, I'm just thankful for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Negus Imhotep with Imhotep Memory Consultancy, LLC, and I provide cultural competency training. I do cultural equity audits for businesses that want to be equitable. I also deal with recruitment marketing strategies, and I work intensely with community networking and advising. And my organization is set on empowering institutions and foster inclusive environments and equitable practices for businesses. I just enjoyed this day. You can also look at and see my information on LinkedIn. It's a website on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast on Amplified DSM. And the name of the show is called Babylon Makes the Rules. And I deal with a lot of cultural justice types of podcast shows that I deal with historical truth telling and just want to bring up and reclaim the narrative so I could just help enlighten people. If you look at LinkedIn, look at some of my posts I put on LinkedIn. Sometimes they're quite outrageous. Some people like them, and then it pissed the mega people off. I love this to see, when those trolls get on your on LinkedIn and try to come in and my people didn't own slaves. I don't give a damn. I'm telling you what I'm telling you. So I love this. But my dad told me before he passed, he said, son, I know you was born to harass white folks. That's what it is. I said, no, I just want to tell the truth, Dad. But I don't mind. I'm just happy because it's a beautiful day, and it was. I'm just elated to be with a circle of intelligent people who are speaking on this line.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Negus. So we appreciate your time and your sharing here. This was really, really valuable. And for all of you, of course, Dr. Latifa, even though you didn't manage to speak again because you understand that you are in the airport. And of course, and Dr. Marcia was not able to join us today. She was occupied with some other team, but of course, we are always with her also. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn, for joining us again. We are happy to have you here. And of course, our Holy Reverend Gloria, thank you so much, Ma. We appreciate you.
I've been working on and just signed up for a course on Yoruba, and
Lovely.
I'm learning new words. And one I always remember was the final one that I knew before I took the class, and it was the word Odabo.
Ah,
Odabo,
Odabo. Oh,
Odabo.
you remember Obehi? I tried to teach you Odabo. Well done. I'm going to be
Odabo.
testing you. I'm going to be testing you, Dr. Negoso.
Hey, I'm gonna try to. Hey, I want to be able to where I can just communicate with you and just say the hell with English.
Yeah. And another one to remember, Alafia. That is hello, and it's not just hello. It's
I
really
love.